When you read ancient texts, you come across some pretty strange rules. But one of the oddest has to be a law about fashion. A very specific rule that, honestly, at first glance, just seems bizarre. But what if pulling on this one strange thread could actually unravel a much bigger, more profound idea? And there it is, right from the book of Deuteronomy. The rule is super simple. Don't wear clothes made of both wool and linen. And this wasn't just a friendly suggestion, it was a direct command. Which, of course, makes you ask, why? I mean, what could possibly be so wrong with mixing these two specific fabrics? The ancient Hebrews even had a special word for this forbidden mix, shaʿatnez. And get this, it wasn't a ban on all blended fabrics. Nope, it was super targeted. It was specifically against combining wool, which comes from an animal, a sheep, with linen, which comes from a plant, the flax plant. So what's the deal here? Was this just some practical rule? Maybe the fabrics don't wash well together or they wear out faster. Or was this about something way deeper? A spiritual symbol that was meant to teach a really important lesson? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together. Okay, so to figure this out, our first clue is to look at what other laws are hanging out right next to this one in the text. Context is everything. So what kind of pattern does this weird fashion rule actually fit into? And it turns out this clothing law isn't a solo act at all. It's actually part of a trio of rules all about not mixing different kinds. You've got don't crossbreed your animals, don't plant two different kinds of seeds in the same field, and, well, don't weave these two fabrics together. All of a sudden, a theme starts to pop out. Respect the distinctions that God has made. And this whole idea of separation, it's not new. In fact, it's woven right into the very first pages of the Bible. The creation story in Genesis is really a story about bringing order to the world by separating things. Seriously, think about it. God separates light from darkness. He separates the waters above from the waters below. He separates the land from the sea. And then, when all the creatures show up, each one is made according to its kind. The message seems to be that creating a good and orderly world involves making clear distinctions and setting boundaries. So this shaʔatnez law feels like a tiny, everyday reflection of that huge cosmic idea. But just when you think you've got it all figured out, the story takes this really fascinating turn. And honestly, this is the clue that cracks the whole case wide open. Okay, get this. There was one person, in all of Israel who was not only allowed, but was actually commanded to wear a mix of wool and linen. And that person, it was the high priest. So for every regular person, mixing these fabrics was a huge no-no. But for the high priest, the one serving in the holiest place, that wool and linen blend was a required part of his sacred uniform. And this one little exception just changes everything about how we understand this rule. I mean, this proves the rule couldn't have been about anything practical, right? If mixing wool and linen made for a bad piece of cloth, you would definitely not command the most important religious figure in the nation to wear it for his most important job. No way! The reason had to be symbolic. This special mixture was set aside for holy service, representing a kind of secret union that only the priest, as the bridge between God and the people, could wear. So if it's symbolic, what on earth was it symbolizing for the everyday person? Well, it was woven right into the fabric of their national and spiritual identity. The entire purpose of the nation of Israel was to be holy. But here's the thing about the Hebrew word for holy, kadosh. It doesn't really mean morally perfect in the way we might think. Its core meaning is set apart or distinct. They were called to be different from all the nations around them. So this clothing law became a constant physical reminder of that calling. Every single time they got dressed, they were acting out a tiny little parable. Just like you don't weave these two threads together, you don't weave your unique identity and your relationship with God with the religious practices of other nations. It was a metaphor they lived in every single day. But the story doesn't end there. In the New Testament, this very physical idea gets picked up, and it goes through a huge transformation. It moves from being about the fabric on your body to the state of your heart. The writers of the New Testament often talk about laws like this one as being shadows. Now, that didn't mean they were meaningless, not at all. It meant they were pointing forward to something bigger, a more solid and lasting reality. So the question becomes, what's the reality that the shaʔatnez law was a shadow of? And we see this really clear shift happen. The focus moves from the outside to the inside. A law written on stone tablets becomes a principle meant to be written on the human heart. The command, "don't mix fabrics," gets transformed into a spiritual warning, like the one about not being unequally yoked, which is basically a call to avoid partnerships that would pull your core faith and identity in two different directions. See, the principle of separation is still there, but it's now applied to our inner world, our morality and spirituality. The dangerous mixture isn't wool and linen anymore. It's a heart with divided loyalties, trying to serve both God and the values of the world at the very same time. So, what does this ancient fashion rule mean for any of us today? Well, while the specific command about fabric might be a thing of the past, the core principle it was trying to teach is absolutely timeless. Because when you get right down to it, the ultimate point was never really about the textiles. The fabric was just the classroom. The lesson was about identity. Yeah, the law was way less about textiles and way more about identity. It was a tool to help shape a people's whole understanding of who they were called to be, a community that was set apart, wholehearted, and totally distinct in their devotion. The spiritual truth that lasts is all about integrity, about wholeness. It's about avoiding what the New Testament writer James calls a double-minded life, that unstable feeling that comes from trying to live with a heart that's woven from two incompatible loyalties. And just like that, this ancient textile law turns into a really personal question for us. The issue isn't what's on the outside anymore, but the state of our heart on the inside. It forces us to ask, is my life, my devotion, my core identity, is it woven from a single integrated cloth, or is it a chaotic mess of incompatible threads?